Lundy Island lies 11 miles north-northwest of Hartland Point in Devon. To tell the story of the landing ground, we first have to go to Barnstable in 1934. In the summer of that year, Barnstable Aerodrome opened on a site at Heenton Court Farm, a few miles northwest of Barnstable town. As well as the usual club flying and lessons, the proprietors, Messrs. Boyd and Nash, had an eye on the charter market, and to that end bought a de Havilland Dragon and leased a monospar. The Harmon family, owners of Lundy, were all too keen to have an air service, their regular transport being the motor vessel Lorena. An aerodrome site was prepared, including the removal of a dry stone wall, and the first aeroplane to land on Lundy was the monospar. Regular services started using the de Havilland Dragon, although not for long. It indulged in a spot of crashery, hitting another dry stone wall and having to be returned to the mainland by boat. The monospar, seen here at Barnstable, continued the service, but with only 3 passenger seats. It wasn't ideal. Messrs. Boyd and Nash, now trading as Lundy and Atlantic Coast Airlines, bought a short Scion and in time another. These proved entirely satisfactory, carrying thousands of passengers to and from Lundy from the mid-1930s up until the outbreak of the Second World War. As well as human passengers, the airline carried freight and animals and occasionally dealt with emergencies. They also carried the Lundy Post, which unusually had its own stamps for carriage to and from the mainland. Unfortunately, thanks to the antics of the Austrian corporal, Lundy and Atlantic Coast Airlines Limited ceased trading in September 1939. During the Second World War, Barnstable Aerodrome became part of RAF Chivenor, but in 1950 Devon Air started regular services from Chivenor to Lundy. The Devon Air service operated from Rafton Gate, which was the post-war name for the pre-war aerodrome site, now covered in dispersals and taxiways, making an excellent hard runway for the Osters then in use. Devon Air services continued for several years without incident, that is, until the 20th of August 1955. On that day, this Oster J1 Autocrat had an engine failure, approximately halfway between Lundy and the mainland. A combination of good fortune and excellent seamanship saw all 3 occupants rescued by the SS Haraldsborg. Devon Air continued operations with their remaining Oster, but the Air Ministry stipulated a 5,000-foot minimum crossing height between Lundy and the mainland for all single-engine public transport. A Miles Aerovan was acquired from Marmol Air Services at Southend and ferried to Rafton Gate. Belgian registered, it never entered service on the Lundy route. After several years' storage in the hangar, it was pushed outside in November 1963 and burnt. In 1969, Lundy Island was sold to the Landmark Trust. Nowadays, most summer visitors arrive on Lundy via the MS Oldenburg, the Landmark Trust's own ship, and in the winter, Castle Air operate a helicopter service from Hartland Point to Lundy. Fortunately, unlike so many old airfields we explore that have returned to agriculture, moorland, or the subtopian misery of post-war development, Lundy Airfield is virtually unchanged after 90 years and subject to a small landing fee available for use. On a bright spring morning I lifted off from Roach. If you look closely you'll see there's two of us on board the aeroplane, me and my younger son. The aeroplane was going very well, climbing at least 300 feet per minute, but we weren't heading for Lundy. The runway on Lundy is about 400 yards long, rough with tufty grass and crossed by sheep tracks. It's really not the place to have a problem in your 90-year-old vintage aeroplane, as someone found out last year. In an ideal world, with three of us wanting to go to Lundy, we would have taken the short Scion with its single-engine safety, or enjoyed the multi-motor mindedness of the magnificent monospar. Anyway, we needed another aeroplane. The Cessna 172 is a fine workhorse, used by flying clubs all over the world, and the most produced aeroplane in history. With a 160 horsepower Lycoming, sturdy undercarriage, a nice big wing and decent flaps, it's quite a suitable aeroplane to take to Lundy. Of course one has to ignore the advertising nonsense. Hopefully the executive who came up with this aeroplane driving drivel was strangled with his own pyjama cord. The meteorological office at Exeter had promised a day of sunshine and scattered cloud. Of course, reality was somewhat different. Lundy was clearly visible from Hartland Point, and we hugged the cloud base just above 3,000 feet for the crossing. Sometimes it's necessary to do a low pass at Lundy to clear the sheep off the runway, but the warden had assured me the sheep were elsewhere. We parked the mighty Cessna and walked to the Morisco Tavern to pay the landing fee. They take cards these days, as well as sterling and doubloons. Ginger beer and a bag of crisps later, and it looked like the sun might come out. We scuttled back to the airstrip to try and get some film of the island in the sunshine. It was going to be a close-run thing. Cloud was almost obscuring the sun again. We stayed a while longer, taking a walk and exploring the old lighthouse that's been disused since 1893. By 8 o'clock in the evening it was getting cold. We decided to head back to Bodmin. If you want to fly into Lundy, contact the warden via the Landmark Trust website, by telephone or email. There's also an annual fly-in called Lundy Sunday, usually held in August. It's taken place for many years. It's a super event and well worth attending if you can. Well, that was a thoroughly enjoyable evening out. As always, thank you for watching.